today. And we are going to record the meeting, which we'll also have posted on our website in case you aren't able to attend the whole thing, or if there's others that you know that wanted to join and couldn't today. So this will always be available to you. And I wanted to just start off briefly by introducing SWMS before we get going on our seminar today. I'm Trisha Thibodeau. I'm the current president of SWMS. We have a really awesome steering committee that help to plan and organize different events that we're doing on a national level for SWMS, including Alex, who kindly is presenting for us today, as well as Katie Gallagher and Trish Albano, who are here. We also have a mentor chair, a clerk, a treasurer, and another chapter liaison that do a lot of work for us here at SWMS. And for those of you who may not be familiar with SWMS, we're a nonprofit organization that aims to bring together marine scientists of all career levels to discuss the diverse experiences of women in marine science and celebrate the research done by women in the field and promote the visibility of women within the marine science community. And we tend to focus on early career scientists, but we have a really broad base of members from across the world. And one of the other aspects of SWMS that's unique is that we have chapters. And so we have over 20 chapters across the United States, including 3 international. We're really excited. We just had one of our chapters in Nigeria get reinvigorated, and we have a new chapter starting in Texas, which is awesome. And this is a great way to create smaller communities of women in marine science within the broader field at your local institutions and organizations. And we're emphasizing becoming a SWMS member. So there's the SWMS national organization, that's the nonprofit, and then there's the individual chapters. But by being an official member of the national nonprofit organization, you have access to our mentorship program. We have a Slack channel where people will post often job opportunities, and it's another networking tool. We have newsletters that go out to anyone that's available, but we also do have exclusive resources that sometimes go out to just our members. You're able to vote in our annual elections for the steering committee. And we also have these webinars that we offer to anyone for free, but we are in the process of focusing on a scaled system or a tiered system where members would get access to the webinars for free, and those that aren't members would pay a small fee of $5 to $10 to join. And we're also in the process of establishing some research and travel grants to support women going to this time, the Ocean Sciences meeting next year. And we'll be putting out a call for applications in September, so stay tuned to that. And then also by being part of the SWMS membership, you're helping to support our broader programming and advocacy efforts. And because we are a nonprofit, we have to charge dues, but we try to keep them small to be more inclusive of different career stages and economic levels. And so this is the current pricing that we encourage folks to do if they're interested in becoming a member. And if you scan the QR code here, it will take you to our page on our SWMS website for becoming a member. And before we get started today, I just wanted to go over some community guidelines. These are guidelines that we hold for all of our different events, both in person and virtual. And so we focus on remembering that no one knows everything, but together we know a lot, and what's learned here leaves here, and what's said here stays here. Set aside what can wait, so try to be present during this webinar. Listen actively, respecting others while they're talking, and speak from your own experience instead of generalizing. So using I instead of we or you. And we ask that during this talk that Alex is going to give, that you wait to hold questions until the end, and then you can use the raise hand function or put your questions in the chat, and those of us here from the steering committee will work to monitor that for you. And we also ask that you turn off your camera, at least while Alex is presenting, just to reduce the bandwidth. And then once we open it up to Q&A, we'll have, we'd love to see your smiling faces. And actually, we're first going to do a picture. We love to take photos of everybody that's here as a way to just show the broad faces of marine science. And so if you don't mind putting your camera on, then we can take that photo quickly. Trish, can I nominate you to take that photo if you don't mind? And I'll stop sharing here. Sorry to throw you on the spot, Trish. You're muted if that makes a difference.
Yeah, that does make a difference. I'm just talking to myself over here. All right. So we're gonna do we've got a lot of you here, so we're gonna do 3. So we're gonna do, all right, everybody smile on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, you can relax. All right, we're gonna do 1 more. Sorry, takes a minute to get screenshots going. All right, I'm gonna do a second one. 1, 2, 3. All righty, and actually I think we got everyone, so we are good to go. Thanks, Trisha.
Awesome. Thanks, Trish. And no, it's totally not confusing that there's 2 people on the steering committee named Trish and Trisha. So don't worry if you get us totally confused. All right. So with that, I'm going to leave it to Alex to take the lead. At this point, you can take your video off and we'll put them back on for the Q&A at the end. So take it away, Alex.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Trisha, and welcome everyone to the Not Your Mama's Interview and Negotiation Strategies webinar. So we're going to have fun today and walk through some tips and strategies for interviews and negotiation of salaries. So let me pull up my slides. All right, so I'm Alex Sinclair, and I'll be your presenter today. And the agenda for today's webinar is I will start with a brief speaker bio. We'll talk about the hiring process, and then non-traditional ways to get an interview, some interview strategies, and then finish with salary negotiation strategies. So I have 25 years experience as both a systems engineer and electrical engineer, and that was gained primarily in industry at universities and at a national lab working on oceanographic instrumentation and also space-based instruments, as well as setting up systems engineering graduate programs at 2 universities. I'm an Army veteran, and I have, over the course of my career, significant experience both being the interviewee and also the interviewer in many different settings. And over, excuse me, over this past year, I have gone to many interviews, and I've also been on hiring teams. So today I would like to share some of that well-gleaned information with you. So I'll start by talking about the hiring process. Now, I personally didn't have any appreciation for the complexity of the hiring process, really in any organization, until I was on hiring teams. I just didn't know how much effort was going on behind the scenes, because as a candidate, I just saw, oh, there's an opening, I applied to it. You know, what is taking so long for them to get back to me? What is taking so long after I interview for them to get back to me? I just don't understand, you know, why this is taking several weeks. But now I know. So initially, a hiring need is identified by the organization. Then they decide if there is budget that they can allocate to that position, and they approve the budget to be allocated to make that hire. Then the hiring manager and usually a number of other people work with that person and HR to write the job opening or the job requisition, and that gets approved by HR. Then it's posted, and depending on what the requirements are at the state and federal level, then it may be required to be open to applicants for a minimum of 3 to 7 days. Usually 7 days is the minimum, but I have seen it as short as 3 days. It can also be open indefinitely, especially in industry, if say they are looking for software engineers, and it's a software company, and so that company is always looking for software engineers. So they just they don't have a close date on that requisition. They just leave it open because they're continuously hiring for that type of position. Also, sometimes the requisitions are written either in a very specific way or in a very detailed way, but sometimes it just doesn't matter because there was a lot of work to be done to create that requisition. So they just leave it up at their website, and then potential applicants come across it and apply to it, and they use that single requisition to fill many positions over time. So they receive applications, and then the hiring team looks, HR and the hiring team, they look at the applications, they determine whom they're going to interview. Sometimes there's a phone screen initially by HR or by the hiring manager. Usually it's a half an hour to a 1 hour phone call, or even a virtual meeting where there's an assessment done really from both the candidate side and the hiring manager side to see if it's worth pursuing this and moving into a formal interview. So if it moves into a formal interview, then HR does a lot of work behind the scenes with the hiring team, determining when they're available to do interviews. If the candidate is going to travel on site, making travel arrangements, finding out when the candidate is available, and committing to that interview schedule. So that's all done. Then the candidate arrives or is in a virtual meeting for the interview, and the interviews progress and end. Then the hiring team gets together and discusses how the interviews or the single interview went. And then they decide whether it's a go or no go to hire that candidate or the other candidates. Now, sometimes at this point, the hiring manager and or team decide that they don't like anybody. And so then they're going to just start the process again. And in some cases, there might be some follow-on questions for one or more candidates to try to whittle down the field and then get to the point of selecting one single candidate for that role. So then HR writes the offer letter and presents it to the candidate. And in the offer letter, it will state a salary, like the title, a salary, and the start date. So at this point, then the candidate negotiates salary, possibly. The start dates are usually really flexible, and so could discuss a start date. But this is absolutely the time when you would negotiate your salary. And then HR takes that information, back to the hiring team, maybe back to the compensation team if they have that. And they determine what the increase in salary would be if they can match your counter offer or come somewhere within the ballpark of it. Then they write the new offer letter, submit it to the candidate, and then the process iterates again. So the candidate either accepts counter offers or rejects the offer from HR. So all of this to say, there's a tremendous amount going on when any organization, no matter whether it's industry, government, universities, there's a lot going on behind the scenes to get one single person hired. And this is why it can take, a minimum of 3 weeks if it's really industry and they have it all together. And there's just really great coordination between HR and the hiring team and the onboarding process. They can turn it around in 3 weeks. But typically it takes 1 to many, many more months to complete the process. So there are non-traditional ways to actually get an interview. Traditional ways, I'm sure you're familiar with. You reach out to your current network and you just network like crazy with people you know. Then there are all the websites that I have listed here as sources for potential job openings. One that you may not be familiar with is the University of Delaware Coastal List. This is a listserv. And so you can just Google University of Delaware Coastal List, and it will give you, you'll come up with a link where you can subscribe to that list. But that's a really great list for coastal oceanography, marine science, for both graduate positions, postdoc positions, and then also industry positions. Now, the non-traditional way to get hired, and I've used this multiple times, is that you identify which organizations you would like to work for. And then you figure out who are the hiring managers or the principal investigators for the projects that you would like to work on, and you contact that person directly. And so maybe you checked the university or the company website and you don't see any opening listed. But I highly recommend that you go ahead, if you're very interested, you go ahead and you try to contact a person who is managing that project and send an email, and just in like maybe 2 paragraphs, it could even be 1 paragraph, you summarize your interests, your education, your experience. And then what I think is really important is to ask for a brief phone call with this person. Now, some people are buried in work and they're just not going to have time. But surprisingly, a lot of people will agree to at least a 15 to 30 minute conversation. Now, this may lead nowhere as far as a job is concerned, but it's an excellent opportunity to have a real-time conversation about a project that you want to work on, because what happens is that maybe that project gets more funding in the future, or you, through the conversation with that person, then you discover that yes, they are in fact looking for somebody else. They just haven't advertised it yet. So I personally had a conversation with an oceanography lab director, and it was well over about 1.5 years ago. And we talked about his needs in his organization and the lab needs. And then 1 year later, he sent me an email saying, we finally got funding together and we're going to hire for this position. Are you interested in applying? So it's really all about very aggressively trying to make contacts with people, regardless of the openings that you see stated at websites. And I think it's especially true within a university setting. Now, from my own experience, it's been far easier to contact people at universities and to get a response. It's more difficult to find people at companies because a lot of times you don't even know who is actually working on those projects. And so I try to find the information on LinkedIn, but sometimes I just can't find the information. Now, another way is to attend conferences, and when you go to the conference, take business cards, but have business cards printed that on front and back that are basically like little mini resumes. You can get a lot of information onto a business card in 8-point font. So when you're at the conference, very aggressively exchange business cards with other people, go up, meet strangers, just really network as much as possible and exchange cards. Then after the conference, if you're like everyone else, you have a lot of business cards, and with yours having more information on it, then it will help that other person remember who you are and give more information about your background. Okay, so now you're at the point where you are getting interviews scheduled. It's really common and normal to go, oh, I've got this one in the bag. I don't need to apply to any other job. I can just stop my search right here. Don't do that. Keep looking and keep applying elsewhere. Because again, the whole hiring process can take 1 to 6 months. You don't know if you will, in fact, be the person who is offered the job. And so it's good to keep all of your options open and keep pursuing other options while this process takes place. I mean, I personally am still very actively applying for other positions until my counter offer for salary is accepted and they send me the final offer. I am still very actively looking because anything can go wrong during that whole process. And it's better, I think it's better to have other things waiting in the queue that maybe you've already started into the initial interview stage with other organizations while you are finalizing the offer for the one position. Okay, so when you're, or actually before you get to the interview, then ask HR or the hiring manager before the interview for the names and titles of the people that you are going to interview with. And then you have time to go out and read some papers by those people, to thoroughly look at a company website, to look into project information, and to look on LinkedIn about information about the interviewers. So what you're doing is you're doing a down and dirty, just information gathering on these interviewers. Because when you go to the interview, or if it's a virtual interview, then you need to have questions for each person ready. The only way, say mode of interview where this doesn't work out so well is if you have a virtual panel interview, because then you might have 6 to 10 people online And it's nearly impossible to ask them questions. I mean, you end up just asking very generic questions at the end because there are so many people in that setting for that interview. But if you're in this situation where you are going on site and you're going on one-on-one interviews or even small groups of people, absolutely be prepared with information about them that you can ask them. Also, before you go into the interview, I recommend practicing as much as possible, giving answers to common interview questions, which there are a number of resources online stating what common interview questions are. And I can tell you that typically interview teams ask a lot of the same questions as what's posted online. But don't only practice in your head giving the answers, you know, whether you're by yourself, with friends, with colleagues, or what I think is a really great way to do it is record yourself with your cell phone and play it back and listen to your response. But say the words out loud, because you're going to really just bumble through them initially, but that's okay. So you do it a couple of times so that when you are actually in the interview setting, that they come out much more fluently and coherently, and you're not so stressed about giving that answer because you've already practiced it. Now, every interview is unique. It's its own little microcosm. You can have anywhere from 2 interviewers, maybe on a phone call, and that's it. I mean, I had that last week, to 22 interviewers. And I had one situation where I interviewed at Hui with 10 people on one day. I flew to San Diego that evening. I had 10 in-person interviews with people at Scripps. And then I had 2 phone interviews that evening with people at Scripps. So, which is the most I've ever had in my entire life. But there's a wide range. It can be phone calls, virtual meetings, on-site. You can have individual interviews, panel interviews, a combo of them. A lot of university positions and some FFRDC positions will require a presentation. So you should have a presentation ready to go. You might have a lab tour. And then typically if you're on site, then there will be a lunch or dinner that will be arranged that will possibly include even more people. Now, know that when you go to lunch or dinner with these people or a coffee break, you are still being interviewed. It will be more casual, but you are still very much in an interview. So be mindful of that. The question style can be anything from a very open question style to a very rigid set of questions. Now, the rigid set of questions I've only encountered for government positions. And for government positions, there is a very large focus on everything being absolutely fair, candidate to candidate, and they don't want anyone to have an unfair advantage. So they ask people the exact same thing. And typically there are no follow-on questions from them, though you can ask questions. Okay, so more about interviews. Keep in mind that this is a competition and bring your A game, because unless you ask and unless they tell you or at liberty to tell you, you don't know how many other people you are competing against. So just keep that in mind. And that's not to stress you out. It's just to bring awareness that that you really do need to bring your A game to every single interview and every single interaction that you have in that interview. So everyone that you interact with can have input to the hiring process. That includes the hiring manager, admin assistants, HR, students, and non-affiliated faculty or managers. Anybody that you interact with, they are going to be asked to give feedback on you. Now, before you go into the interview, I recommend getting plenty of rest and eating healthy food. Stay away from caffeine and sugar in the morning because they're just going to increase your stress and make you crash by midday. Unless, of course, you are a zombie without coffee. Now, interviewers, they'll have different approaches. There's one type of interviewer who is tough, aloof, and no nonsense. But don't be thrown off by this and don't think that that person doesn't like you. It's just that person's interview style. Maybe they've only experienced interviews like that and they think that that's the only way to conduct an interview. It's absolutely no reflection on what they think of you or your skills or what you're going to bring to the team. It's just simply what their persona is in an interview setting. You may never see them act that way again. There's another one where they drill deep on everything that you say. So everything that you do say, make sure that you can give details on it or say, I don't know. Another one is very, what I call kumbaya, super friendly, and it almost doesn't feel like an interview. It feels like you're just chatting with a friend, getting coffee. Don't be fooled by this one either, because you're still being interviewed. And what I think is good to do in this situation is that it's good to direct that person very politely, direct that person into talking about the project, talking about their project, talking about the project that they're hiring for. Try to get it from just hey, what's your favorite color, to talking about the project, your skills, your qualifications, your interests. In this case, you're going to have a more hands-on approach to this conversation without completely putting the person off. Another thing about this personality type for interview is it's important to this person to make a human-to-human connection. So don't completely shut down the chit-chat, but just make sure that you are leaving them with the impression that you are capable of doing this work and you are the best candidate for this position. You may possibly be interviewed by a hiring manager that is not part of the interviewing group, but is required to be there because the organization requires an outside manager to be on the interview team. This typically happens in industry and at national laboratories. So the great thing about this is that, let's say it's not going so well with the job that you're there to interview for, but you kind of really hit it off with this outside hiring manager. Well, you can talk to this hiring manager after and let that person know that you are very interested in the work that they have going on in their group. And there's a possibility that that hiring manager will hire you into their group. That's actually how I went to Sandia National Laboratories. It was a complete disaster with the group that I was there to interview with, but this outside manager came in and we totally hit it off. And it was a very clear like synchronization of what his group was doing and what my interests were. And so I talked to him afterwards. I had to initiate it because if he initiated it, he would seem like he was poaching. So I initiated it, and then he opened up a job requisition. I applied to it. I was hired into his group. So, you know, strange things can happen in interviews. You never know whom you're going to meet. If it's an outside person, it may just end up being a better fit. Who knows? Finally, there's the type where they didn't read your CV or your resume. They're literally trying to scan it very quickly when you're sitting there across from them. So my recommendation for that is help the person out, put them out of their misery, and just start talking about your skills and your qualification and your interests and how they apply to the position. And then also ask them what projects they're working on and what their interests are. And trust me, this type of interviewer will be extremely relieved that you have taken over the conversation and moved it along, and you know, they just need to sit there. Okay, now here's this is a difficult thing to describe, but I think it's important to get beyond just ping pong questions and answers. And so I encourage you to find a way to have a richer conversation with the interviewers. And so one way to do that is to, in the words that you're saying, put yourself on the team. And so talk about the projects, talk about what your vision for your part of the project would be, how you would contribute to it, how your skills and interests align with it. And just really, really put yourself on the project. And the other way to do this is to start asking them about their interests, whether it's work or research interests, the projects that they're working on, what skills are they looking for on their projects? How could somebody contribute the best to their projects? And get them talking about what is important to them. And then finally, besides having specific questions for interviews, if that's possible in the situation, then simply look around their office and their desk, because people are going to put things that they're the most proud of or that are the most important to them on their desk. Pictures of kids, dogs, etc. I once got a job because I commented on the hiring manager's pictures of dogs. And so out of everybody else who interviewed, I was hired because I was seen as the most relatable person, because I could talk to this person about their dogs. So you just never know. But I think it's good to try to make a personal connection with the person so that you can show that you are an agreeable person, you're a team player, you're going to fit in their culture. You're not just here talking about yourself, you're also interested in what's going on their projects and interested in what they need. And then finally, the last kind of interviewer is the hostile interviewer. And so there are two types. In case one, the interviewer says that you do not have the skills or the right amount of skills necessary for the position. And in case two, the interviewer says that they absolutely wouldn't recommend you to be hired for the position. So for case one, some interviewers just simply have this approach. I mean, they look at it like very black and white. They're like, okay, we want you to know MATLAB and Python and Fortran, but oh, you don't know Fortran, so you're out of the running because, you know, the job rec says all three. and they look at required skills very narrowly. Now, with this type of interviewer, then this is pretty easy to address, because then you can talk about what your skills are, and maybe you don't have Fortran, but if you have MATLAB and Python, then clearly you can learn a programming language, and so those are adjacent skills, and you would be more than happy to study up and take training and learn Fortran for them. So as I'm saying here on the slide, then you just describe what you can bring to it, that, and openly admit, yeah, I have a gap in this area, but I also have experience in these other areas that are similar. And, I'd really appreciate and enjoy the opportunity to gain more skills on your team. Now, for case 2, the interviewer can seem to be pretty set in their views. And so I've had this situation a couple of times, and this is why I put on this slide. And what I ended up doing, like I had it one time, and it really it threw me off, and like kind of depressed me, because it's like, God, like this person's so hostile. Why am I even here for the interview? And then the next time it happened, I just said, you're right, and I'm sure that there are plenty of other candidates, and good luck hiring somebody into this position. And so the strange thing that happened is that as soon as I said that to the person, then they started telling me how great I was for the position and what a great fit I was, and how it would be no problem for me to pick up skills. And so I've asked a number of other people, like, why did that happen? And because they very straightforwardly said, I don't think that you're right for the position, and I wouldn't recommend you. And I'm like, I don't understand this, complete switch. And what I've gathered is that it just comes down to somebody has the ball and they have control of the ball. And then when the candidate says, you're right, don't hire me then basically you've taken the ball away from them, and they want the ball back. They want the control ball back. So it's happened a couple of times where I've done this, and the person has completely switched what they're saying. I ended up not taking the position because I don't want to work in that environment, but I found it very interesting. So my main message here is, don't be bullied. And so, interviews, yes, they're tough. They can seem stressful. You're meeting a lot of new people. They're throwing all these questions at you. You're doing the best that you can, but there is a line. And just, don't accept being bullied by the interviewer. Okay, at the end of each interview, then you express to HR and the hiring manager how interested you are in the position, if you are, and make sure that you get business cards from everyone, so that you can follow up with a thank you email for them taking time to interview you, and then express again your interest in the position. It's good to ask HR or the hiring manager what the next steps in the process will be. And also, most importantly, what is the timeline for them to hire into this position? And then let them know that you're available for any follow-up questions. Okay, so now it's been 2 weeks and you've not heard anything. At this point, I would recommend emailing the hiring manager and express interest in the position, and find out if there's an update to their hiring process for this position. Ask them where they're at. If they respond in super wishy-washy language, and you really don't get an answer from them. And you're also applying to other positions, and maybe you've decided you just don't want to wait, like you want them to give you some kind of answer. Then what I recommend doing is I recommend responding and letting them know that you have started the initial interview process with other organizations. Now, this could be true or it could not be true, but just say it very lightly. You're just in this initial phone call stage with some other companies, and then see if their process speeds up or if they change in the amount of information that they are able to give you. Typically, when you say something like that, then it somehow opens up HR or the hiring manager to have a more honest discussion with you about what they're doing with their hiring process for this position that you wouldn't get otherwise. And this strategy is kind of like when you're thinking about buying something, say you're going to buy a property, and then you kind of lag on it. And then the realtor, the salesperson says, oh, just to let you know, there are a lot of other people who are interested in it too. Because what they're trying to do is they're trying to make you move and either buy it or not buy it. And so you're doing the same thing in this interview process. Okay, so if you send an email, you don't get a response, or you get a wishy-washy response, and then you get another wishy-washy response, then all you can do, especially if you really, really want the position, all you can do is just wait it out and see what happens. But in the meantime, continue to look for and to apply to other positions. Okay, so now we're at the point where they have decided they are going to hire you and they've sent you an offer letter of employment. And so now we're going to start talking about salary negotiations. So now the salary negotiation begins, and salary negotiation is 100% your responsibility, and absolutely nobody else is going to do it for you. And it's also very easy. So the hiring manager is not going to initially offer you more money. HR is not going to do it. Absolutely nobody is going to offer you more money. You have to ask for it. So every position has a salary range, and that salary range is determined by maybe a compensation group, like usually universities have a compensation group. Other large organizations have a compensation group, but every single position has a salary range. So they vary, but it's really common to ask for 10% more. I personally recommend going even higher, and because I love salary negotiations. I think they're fun because it's a numbers game. And so I very actively try to find out what is the ceiling of their salary range. And you can get to it pretty quickly with HR. And usually you're having this conversation with HR, the recruiter. Sometimes, like if it's at a university, you'll have the conversation with the principal investigator or the project lead. But if it's an industry or say at a national laboratory, then you're going to have it with the recruiter. But one thing to note is that pretty much all the time, HR, the recruiter, even the hiring manager, they are not the decision makers for the salary ranges. Somebody else is, usually a compensation group. And so HR, recruiters, hiring managers, they are just the middlemen or middle people in these salary negotiations. They have typically absolutely no approval authority. So they need to take your request and they need to give it to the group or the person who has that decision-making authority on increasing salary. And that's it. They're just middle people. So the question is, are salary negotiations hard, long, painful, scary, stressful? No, they're not any of this. They are extremely simple and easy conversations that only take a few words to execute to get the job done. Now, if you've never done a salary negotiation, then you might think, oh, are they going to hate me because I ask for this? Or are they going to rescind their offer of employment? No. Remember that process at the beginning? They went through all of that, and now they are offering you the position. So your job is to do salary negotiation. You go back and forth on that, usually just go back and forth one time. And then they give you another offer because they have a range of salary to hire you within, and then you're hired. There are no hard feelings. It's just part of everybody's process of getting hired. And they are dealing with this all the time. For every single hire, there can be a salary negotiation. Okay, so one thing that I like to do, because I take jobs, like I've take jobs around the country. I've lived around the country. And so before I go into a salary negotiation, actually before I even commit to an interview or apply to a position, I take a look on smartasset.com and I look at taxes. And then I also look at Realtor and on Zillow, because I want to know how much is it going to cost to buy a single family home in that location? What are property taxes? So I do this investigation, if it's a super expensive area, will I even be able to rent in the area? So I do all of that really before I apply, but then I do it again before salary negotiation. So on this slide, then I have examples. If you take a salary of $70,000 a year and you are going to work in California or you're going to work in Washington, then what is the difference in your take-home pay? So the difference in the take-home pay is around $3,000, primarily because Washington does not have state income taxes. That's only part of the picture. It's not anything about real estate or renting a place. Okay, for government salary negotiations, you'll find everywhere, and government HR will say it, and potentially the hiring manager will say it, but everybody will say, if you're new to federal service, then you will be hired at the lowest, the lowest grade level in a particular pay band. So if it's GS 12, then they say, okay, you will be hired at GS 12 step 1. But what they're not telling you, and what only some hiring managers will offer, is that a hiring manager can submit what is called a special qualifications package that increases the step level when making an offer. So let's say the initial conversation is about GS 12 step 1, but then you bring up the possibility that they could submit a special qualifications package and even suggest a step, say, step 4 or 5. And then you have this conversation with the manager submits it. That package needs to go up for approval at sometimes very, very high levels in the organization. That can take up to a month to process, but that can be the difference between, say, $83,000 a year and $93,000 a year. The other thing that federal positions have is that they have a student loan repayment benefit for some of them. The maximum benefit for this is $1,000 a month for 60 months. That's a tremendous benefit if you have student loans. The benefit kicks in after 1 year of employment, but it's something that the manager has to request for you. And honestly, I'm not sure if they can request it and get approval for it after you're hired. So I would definitely try to get it in place before you're hired. Now, for university salary negotiations, there are other benefits beyond just a salary increase. You could explore options for additional lab space, research funding, TA assistance, etc. Okay, I'm going to have to go back a couple of slides because I seem to be missing one of my slides. And I may have just cruised past them. Okay, no. Okay, before I start talking about this slide, I want to give you, and let's see, I don't have a clock with me, so could somebody let me know what time it is?
Yeah, it's close to 1, Alex. So I don't know if you just want to do your final thoughts, and then we can take time for questions if people are able to stay.
Okay. So what I would like to say is that a salary negotiation can be as easy as something like you were offered $70,000. And usually you'll get a verbal offer from a recruiter. And so they say, we're going to send you an offer letter with an offer of $70,000 a year. And would you accept that? And then you say, well, I was looking more for $80,000 a year. And that's it. That's as simple as it needs to be. And then they take it up to whomever they need to get approval for it. But with very few words, then you can significantly increase your salary. Okay, so final thoughts. Interviews are great and fun environments because you are going to be in this unique situation. You get a chance to shine, compete, meet new people, and have fun learning about projects and meeting other cool people. Salary negotiation is easy. Again, you just have to say a few words, but you have to say it because nobody else is going to offer you more money. You have to get it for yourself. Now, online reading, I recommend that you check out common interview questions. I also recommend that you read some information on negotiation. A good one to look at is Ask for It by Linda Babcock and Sarah Leshever. This is specifically geared for women and for women to negotiate in many different aspects of their life. I also recommend reading over the course of your career, really information on selling and sales, because you have a brand that you are going to sell and bring to your organization and that you're going to build throughout your career. And so having some basic information about selling and sales when working in organizations and also when pursuing research funding will be beneficial for you. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending today's webinar. And now we can take questions.
Great, thanks, Alex. And I know it's 1, so if people have to head out, feel free to sign off and we'll still be recording so that you can have access to these questions afterwards. And Alex, I don't know if you're willing to share your email in case people want to reach out directly, but if you are, put that in the chat and people can have access to that.
I will do that now.
Awesome. But yeah, so we can go ahead and anyone that had a question, raise hand and we can select you to ask away. So Monica, if you want to go ahead.
Hi, Alex. Great presentation. Lots of great information. So I am recently in a position where my contract is ending at the end of the month. So I have been actively looking, not just for funding, but for other positions. And what I found sometimes when I'm filling out the application online, they're asking for my salary, like, what is your salary range? It doesn't necessarily show the salary range of the position. A lot of positions don't always show the salary range, but they're asking me personally for it. And I've talked to some HR folks that say, just go from 0 to whatever, because it's just a way for them. Sometimes they use it as a way to like either put you in the no pile right away and not even give you an interview because they think that you're too far off of range of what they're willing to give. So how do you suggest managing that or going around that?
Yeah, so Colorado is a state where all employers who advertise a position must advertise a salary range. And so I often look for a similar type position in Colorado. And Colorado has a bunch of federal laboratories. So there are a number of research-oriented and then along with engineering positions advertised in Colorado. Now, some of the companies will advertise a huge range. And so I just look at what, the average number is, or I look around more for, somebody who's advertising a smaller range. So that's one way I get a possible salary. But honestly, I look at the box that I have to enter it into, and I will put in the box negotiable. Some boxes will not accept letters. They'll force you into putting a number in there. And if it's a number, then I look at the salary ranges for Colorado, and then I go by my own experience for what that position typically pays. And then I just go a little bit higher and put it in the box. Because putting a number in there doesn't hold you to anything, and it doesn't hold them to anything. And so, I mean, if the position typically pays, $70,000 a year, and you put in $250,000 a year, yeah, HR is probably going to take you out of the pile. But if it's a reasonable number, even if it's somewhat higher, which I personally always go higher, I just always do it. And recently I interviewed for a position that the salary range really was about 175 to 185. And I had put in the box 240, and knowing that that was going to be too high, but I still interviewed with them, and they talked to me about it. They're like, we can't go anywhere near that. This is what, we can offer. Would you be interested in that? And so just know that a lot of times you will be asked to put something in. And if you can put in letters, I would just put in negotiable. I don't know if HR would like that or not, but I just always put negotiable if I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Abby?
Hi, I just wanted to ask, if you're like, do you have any advice for asking about promotions, either receiving one or if your job duties have increased substantially from the job that you were originally offered? Is it appropriate to ask for compensation for that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, one thing to do is that, and it doesn't matter whether you've done this or not, but one thing I recommend is at the end of every week, at a position, you summarize what you've completed that week and what your contributions have been, because you'll be able to bundle all of that into a performance review at the end of the year, or into justification for requesting a salary raise or a promotion. And But you could also look at, like if you haven't done that, you can look at what are the responsibilities that you are fulfilling right now. And, and if a person with those responsibilities in your organization, I'm just going to make something up, is at a level 5 and you're at a level 3, well, then you can approach your hiring manager or your manager and just say, this is what I've been doing. This is what I've been contributing. This is the level that I've been working at, and what I've been able to contribute to the project and the successes that the project has had. And I notice that people who are also fulfilling this type of role, that they are at a level 5, but I'm at a level 3. I would like to know if you would consider promoting me and giving me a salary raise to compensate me for the work that I'm doing. And then that opens the door and opens the discussion and lets them know that you are actively looking for a promotion and a raise to compensate you fairly for the work that you're doing.
And if it's a situation where they're like, you don't know what, so it's like a federal government position, obviously there are specific levels and those salaries are posted. But if it's a range where you don't know what an equivalent person would be making, would you just recommend looking it up online?
I would try online, and then I would just go for it. I would go for it, and like try to get something online. I wouldn't say that I found something online. Right. I would just say that this is the salary that I would like you to consider, and this is the promotion to consider.
And you would give them like a range versus just a number.
I'd probably just give them a number. I mean, you could give them a range.
All right.
Because the biggest thing about this is that you are bringing awareness to this manager. Like maybe this manager already knows, but they're like, hey, she'll do this work and not ask, for more compensation. But it opens the door to discussion about it. And then that's really like where the rubber meets the road, and you discover, is this manager going to be supportive of progressing you in your career, or will you need to look elsewhere for that promotion and that raise?
Okay, great. That's so helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We can do questions for another 5 or 10 minutes or so. Alex, I don't know if you can see the chat, but we have one from Kate Tremblay, who used to actually be a chapter liaison for us here at SWMS. Yes. So she asks, Alex, have you heard about verbal salary negotiations where women are recommended to not state their range first due to research saying that women undervalue themselves, and to include that information in the actual response?
Yeah. I don't know. I always go obnoxiously high. So I don't know. And I purposely go obnoxiously high because, and actually 2 weeks ago, I was in a room with 3 people and in an interview, and none of these people had salary decision authority. And it's the only time it's ever happened to me. But one person, he asked me, what salary would you be looking at for this position? I didn't respond. I said, what is the typical salary range for this position? Like I threw it back at him. And so then he and another person started talking, and they started talking about salary ranges. So I just verbally threw it back at them, and they said that. And then when they asked me again, And I said, well, because this company is also in Colorado. I said, well, I was looking at similar positions in Colorado, and this is what the stated range is, which was much higher than what they were talking about. And they laughed and they said, we wish we were making that much. And then I said, well, it's really up to the compensation group, right, to determine what the salary range would be for this position. And then they agreed, and then we moved on to talking about something else. So I very much try to hold out. I either hold out as much as possible to the point where it becomes an uncomfortable conversation, and I simply will not state a salary. I will not state it with somebody who is not a decision maker on this. And it does become uncomfortable, but so be it. Because I'm not going to spitball a salary just off the top of my head with somebody who has no decision-making authority on it. Alternatively, like if it seems like it's an agreeable conversation, then I may say something if I know for a fact that I'm not going too low, and I'll just go high. Because sometimes somebody will, like, you'll be in a situation where maybe the person who's interviewing you has the impression that you are going to require a super huge salary, and that you wouldn't even be interested in this position because it's a lower salary. And that may be their motivation for asking. But most of the time I don't give a number, and I don't care how uncomfortable it becomes, because it's not the appropriate place in these interviews for that discussion to be had. That discussion should be had after the interviews, when they're making an offer. You could respond with, well, if I'm your top candidate and you'd like to offer me this position, then, we can discuss this after I see your offer of employment, and just put it back on them.
Great points, Alex. Thanks. We can take 2 more questions. We have one from Alexandra, who's raised their hand.
Yeah, hi, that'd be great. Thank you. This has been really helpful. I wanted to get your thoughts on, in the negotiation process, how asking for a delayed start date might affect your leverage with salary negotiation, specifically for an academic position where maybe you're not coming in to work on a specific project with a specific timeline. If you say to the school, I want to start 6 months later than what's posted in the job, does that affect how much I should be asking for salary in negotiations?
Absolutely not. I think they're 2 completely separate things.
Okay.
And it's I think it's pretty common. I mean, I've seen when I've been at universities that people come in 6 to 12 months later. They should not get you cheap because you're coming in later. Like it's dissociate those 2 things from each other.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alexandra. And we have one last question in the chat from Natalia that I can read.
Okay.
Thank you for all the knowledge you shared, Alex. In my case, I'm applying for a position in Latin America, but they are asking me to write my salary expectations in the cover letter. I'm not sure whether to write a range, a number, or, as you mentioned before, write negotiable.
That's a tough one, because it's a different country, right? If possible, I would talk to the recruiter or HR or the hiring manager, and I would ask, what is the motivation for putting a salary in the cover letter. And just see how hardcore they are about it. And I mean, are they just casually looking for a range? Is it something that they just require in all cover letters? Ask if you say that you are negotiable, will that take you out of running as a candidate? I would just have a conversation about it. And then if, you know, I'm forced to put something in, then I'd put a range, but my range low end would start at the high end.
Great.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, for sure. So we did have one last question come in, so I feel like that's fine to do one more question. What do you say when they ask you how much you're currently making?
I say that it doesn't matter. Because it doesn't. I mean, I say, like, literally what I say is I say, that doesn't matter for this position. And I just pivot. I pivot to the current position. I say, for this position, and from what I've seen, it looks reasonable that the range would be this, if I state a range. But mostly I just say, it doesn't matter. Or alternatively, if you feel like you need to make up a number, I just say something really high that isn't even true. And because they absolutely will never and can never ask you to share your pay stub from your current or past employers. It's never going to happen. And so, you know, I really either say it doesn't matter in this situation because I'm looking at this position, or I say something obnoxiously high that's not even true.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Alex. I know especially some of my colleagues that have switched from, you know, government to industry or academia to industry, the pay scales don't even remotely compare. And so it's just better to not, it's like comparing apples to oranges. So
yeah,
to share.
Yeah. And I mean, the one thing that I think about salary negotiation, whether, you know, you're starting out in a position or it's mid-career, you need to take charge of it. And I mean, typically, if you're getting hired, it's a really easy, casual conversation. I've honestly only had recruiters be super jerky twice. Otherwise, it's really easy and really casual and professional. And so you know, you just have to go for it, but you have to take care of yourself, because they are never going to offer a higher amount to you. You have to get it for yourself.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Alex. I think we should wrap up to be respectful of everybody's time. But a huge thank you, Alex, to everything you said. And I just really appreciate you sharing and pulling so many of your past experiences. And that's just so invaluable across different sectors of government and industry. So thank you so much for that and for your confidence and just asking for it. I think it's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I feel like I'm going to have a salary podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if people saw, but Alex did put her email in the chat in case you have more questions to ask. And we also will be posting this recording on our website, swmsmarinescience.com. And thanks again, everyone, for attending, and have a great rest of your Thursday.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everybody. And great job, Alex. Thanks so much again.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Awesome. All right. Bye, everyone.